Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gary Fuller, and I'm a member of the Speaking of Arts Committee, and it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. She comes to us from the University of Washington School of Art, and as a happenstance, I was asking my cousin, Carol, who you'll meet next month, of some resources at the School of Art. And the person's name who came to the top of her list was a woman named Helen O'Toole. Helen O'Toole is now my new best friend. Helen has a very large title. It's very significant. She's the professor of art and the chair of painting and drawing program at the University of Washington. She's also the current recipient of the Floyd and Delores Jones Endowed Fund. And as you may know, Floyd Jones lived here from 2012 until his passing in 2018. So Helen has a distinct connection to Horizon House. Let me tell you some of the things that are about her. She was born and raised in Ireland and now lives in Seattle. She's been on faculty since 1996. She's best known for her large-scale works, and I do mean large-scale works. So she's a practicing academic, which is grateful for her students. She moved to the United States in 1986 to, actually, as she described it, to escape Ireland and the poverty and all the entanglements of there. She is the recipient of a Guggenheim Memorial Foundation Fellowship, a Contemporary Northwest Arts Award, the Pollock Krausner Award, the Jack and Grace Presner Fellowship, and the Wyckoff Milliman Endowment Fund. She completed her MFA work at the School of Art Institute of Chicago. She spent her summer I discovered now that the Skowhegan School of Painting in Maine, which is a renowned school, summer school. She is an interesting lady because she talks about not only what she knows how to teach, but how she knows how to do it. So I think you will enjoy listening to this delightful woman. I give you Helen O'Toole.
Thank you. Very kind, Gary. So can you hear me? If I'm not, okay, yeah. Is that better? I can often speak too quickly, and I have a lisp, and I have an Irish accent. So that's a few things that are against me. So I'm usually a little bit kind of slow getting started. But I want to just acknowledge that before I get going this afternoon, that just land acknowledgement that we live on the stolen Coast Salish lands, specifically the ancestral lands of the Duwamish, Suquamish, Tulalip and Muckleshoot tribes. And for me, actually, land acknowledgement is important because of where I come from in Ireland, and I suppose kind of the reminders, if you like, that are everywhere in the landscape. And also, I think that my work maybe delves into that on a certain level. I'll kind of move slowly, but hopefully not too quickly. Also, if I'm going too fast, let me know, or if you want me to kind of stay with an image, I will. The one thing I wanted to say in relation to Skowhegan, so many years ago in 1989, I had the great honour and opportunity to go to Skowhegan, a summer school in Maine, and one of the teachers was Jacob Lawrence. And of course, me being off the boat, I didn't know who Jacob Lawrence was. But I remember his talk. And I also remember what was amazing to me as a young artist was that he honoured his wife, and he also said, you know, I wouldn't be the artist I am today without Gwen. And I remember that struck a chord, really, like, you know, just stayed with me. But I was very fortunate then to be, I have signed up for a group critique. I didn't know who he was, so I didn't do an individual critique with him. And I have to say it was he was one of the kindest people I've ever, and kindest and most insightful people I've ever encountered in the studio. He did like my work, but that's beside the point. But it was a great honor. And when I came out here, I knew that I didn't really know he taught at University of Washington, but I knew that he lived in Seattle, or I'd heard about it. And I was way too shy to contact him. I always regretted it since. So I'm starting here with, this is right outside my parents' house. And this was taken a few years ago. My father was quite ill, so we kind of were looking after him at home a lot of the time. But this was one morning where I couldn't sleep, and I was outside, and I went outside like at around 5 a.m, and there was a lovely mist. So that's I'm from a village called Ballintubber, and it's famous because there's an abbey, an old abbey that was built in 1216. And my father actually was a stonemason. He worked on that abbey, and was his pride and joy. So this is another picture of my father working in the fields. This here is a famine cottage, and this, when I was a kid, this was our hen house. The hens, and I don't think the ducks were in there, but we didn't know much about it. Sorry, my apologies. We didn't know much about it, except that in recent years, and I say in the last 10 years, Dad fixed it up again. He didn't have to rebuild it, but he roofed it, and he, I suppose, I was about to say corrected the stone, but he, you can see probably parts of it that he dealt with, but it was supposedly a schoolhouse, and it was because it had a door and a window, so it was kind of a posh house. It's tiny, so there probably was 9 or 10 people that lived in that house, and all at the back there's a kind of, if you were to go left, there's a road it's barely discernible now, but there was like a whole village that lived near there, and they were all wiped out during the famine. And of course, our family wouldn't have lived in this area. We were transplants from a different part of Ireland. First Cromwellian rebellion, and then we were living on one of the islands, we believe, in Inishturk, and then moved to the mainland. And the Land Commission gave us land in the late 1800s in Ballintubber, where we are today. This is the ferry fort, which is, again, our house is just over here. So very close at ferry fort near, and the reek is Croagh Patrick. That's that conic shaped mountain, sacred mountain in the distance. And all these are kind of important places to me. That's the ferry fort, same ferry fort near Mick Burke's, and the dog was our dog Moss, who sadly passed away. And then this is something that I've kind of, I didn't know it was called a souterrain. It's in the well garden, and the well garden is all the fields had names, and so this was covered in, it was filled in with stones by my grandfather, and then my dad, again in the last 10 years, Dad lived to 96, but he sort of took all the stones out and he put the protective wall around it, or maybe that was there. I don't know if this part was there, but it was filled in, and you can. We haven't had we have had archaeologists look at it, but it's they go back quite, souterrains, they're referred to as earth houses, underground structures, and they're fairly common in Ireland. They may have been dwellings, but they may also have been used. There may have been rituals kind of during the Iron Age, early Bronze Age. There may have been sacrifices that occurred in them, but we've only been able to go down maybe 15 feet. And I had somebody who's an archaeologist look at it recently, a few weeks ago, and she said she thought when you go down it turns left. I'm not sure. So there's a reason why I'm interested in the souterrains, because of a book I've been reading and kind of, I suppose, dabbling into kind of that research. Okay, I'll go. This is the souterrain. This one here, I'm only showing the difference. That was when Dad was alive and he was taking care. He was rebuilding walls and cleaning everything up. And I know I'm not dissing my lovely brother, but this is it today. I'm looking so hot. And then this is my father. And again, I don't have pictures of my mother, but because of the land, Dad was the one involved with land. But Dad is on the left here when he was young in the 1960s, and that's my uncle. And they were playing melodeons. So we'd grew up we had no TV, but we had a lot of house dances. And that was probably for Yanks who had come from America. And there was a party in the house and in my grandmother's house. But we all lived in that house at that time. And this is today, this is Cathal. I had to put it up, I'm bragging here, but he's my nephew, and he is an absolutely brilliant, and I wouldn't say brilliant, but an accordion player, but he placed second in the All-Ireland flag cule a few weeks ago. But if I could have inserted the music, if I was more technologically savvy, I would have inserted the music. But he's a lovely lad, but I think it's just a lovely honour to go from my father, just Dad here with the melodeon, and to Cathal here, sort of, it kind of in some ways it's where Ireland has come from, sort of the maybe kind of coming into its own maybe 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And now you have kids who are just like, very confident, very accomplished, and, it's kind of wonderful. It gives you hope. So I'm starting with this painting called Dwelling, and I suppose tying in with the idea of dwellings, where I come from, dwellings, this painting, I'm not going to go into the details on all the paintings, but this is a painting that when I did it at the time, it's a long time ago, but I remember thinking about fairy forts. But and again, as you can see from my work, it's abstract. I don't actually paint from direct observation. Sometimes I will go out and draw, but it'll be from the imagination and also from memory. And I think maybe this would be a good point to maybe read my short artist statement and give you more insight into the work. So I'm an abstract painter. My work delves into how stories of land ownership, migration, and histories of oppression affect the life of a people. In my youth, the traces of time were everywhere in the Irish landscape, a repository of a dark history that continues to influence the present. My paintings are dense with thick paint. Each painting is built slowly by adding, scratching, and then scraping back layers to reveal the stratum of their history. So the process of making for me is very similar to the way I see the land and our own history. Clumped and painted layers are metaphors for how painting too can conceal truths and lies. Small fields surrounded by limestone walls built from the rubble of famine cottages. So like where I live, I mentioned the village that was wiped out. Well, most of the walls in the area were built from those famine cottages. So built from the rubble of famine cottages, they're potent reminders of colonial oppression and an ancestral past. Land markers and erasures reveal the political and social turmoil of the past, the stains and secrets of past loves and crimes. And that's, that kind of, you can read into it. It's not, there's no one thing that I think, if you look at Irish history, it is a bit messed up. And but it's a beautiful country and it's got some, great things going on. But I think my paintings, they kind of probe the darkness quite a bit. So I'm just going to move through some of these. This is from the same period. It's called Path. And again, I was thinking of, weaving through the land at the time, the landscape. And this is called Last Light. And you can see the size of the painting. It's up there, yeah. And they're all oil on canvas. If I have a few images that are not oil on canvas. And this, again, the paintings I finished it in 2006, but I started it I lived in Singapore for a while, for 2 years, and I started it in Singapore, so go figure. And that was, about 10 years between start to finish. But sometimes I'll show the painting and it'll come back to my studio and then I'll rework it. This is called O'Toole's Field. I was going to take it out. I was trying to edit. I was telling Gary I was editing a lot because I had too many images. But it's connected to a fairy fort. And I think there's some echoes of it. I mean, I think I did drawings of the field, and it's supposed to, somebody tried to bulldoze the field, and Irish people are very superstitious as well, or there's a lot of kind of what they call pishrogues. And so I had heard that somebody was taking a photograph of the field and their camera jumped out of their, the camera fell out of their hand. And then I tried to take a photograph, my camera jammed, and I said, okay, enough, I won't do any more of this. So this one is actually a small little piece. And it's, I had a small show in Ireland called Beag, which means small. And it, I did all of them on paper, watercolor, mixed media. And so I wanted to see if, this is one of the examples. So Mayo Light, dealing with sort of the landscape at these sort of light that I grew up with maybe. And this is another one from around that period, just a small little painting and titled Moss. And this one here is Bog Ground, and I was, at this point, I think I was really trying to deal more specifically with the feeling of a particular place. What was it like to go in? Bog is a very soft, marshy land, and to this day, people still go to the bog and they foot turf and they bring it home and they burn. Turf is what, if you have an open fire, you use it to keep yourself warm in the winter. So people still use turf. There's kind of a movement against cutting bog because, or turf in the bog, because of the environmental concerns, and they're trying to save the bogs. But this was kind of the painting. It was an abstract painting. I was looking a lot at a painter called Milton Resnick. I'll show an image of his in a little bit. But Milton Resnick was an American painter, abstract painter. But I was also interested in kind of the idea of being inside the bog and scratching into the bog and sort of layering. I don't, it's a painting I still have in my studio, and I don't know, I'm just fond of that particular painting. This is from the same time. And again, the title comes from just the older generation of people lived in these kind of thatched cottages, and they looked out half doors. They had very simple cottages with the door really was kind of how they got their air circulation. There might be a window, but it never opened. But the half door would be important. I just want to know what's going on here. Oh yeah, and then this also was really relating to the bogland, the idea of cutting into the actual ground itself. So first cut was a reference to that. This is Tenebrae, and same period, same time period, but also sometimes it might be the music I'm listening to. So I know some of you are probably experts on music, and I can't pretend I am. I did play a lot of music as a child, but I was listening to an awful lot of Arvo Pärt, and I love his music. So that's kind of partially where the title came from sort of Arvo Pärt, but also a combination with landscape and the sublime and meditation and something that's sacred. And this was, I used to show at a gallery called Linda Hodges. Linda has since closed. And this is just a kind of a scale view of the paintings. You can see, I need to go a bit faster. So this is, so the other thing I'm going to do is I'll show a number of images. I'll go through them quickly. They're the same painting, but I work on them for a long time, and I'm showing you like what happens here. So that's Plough. So that was the first version, 2009, and that was 2013. It wasn't too bad there. I thought actually I could have stayed with it there. But then I think a friend of mine said she wanted to buy it, and I said, oh, it's not done. And I started working on it, and this is how it ended up. So that's what happens. So that'll give you an idea. And this is another painting. And this was first stage. I think I showed it in Ireland, rolled it up and brought it to Ireland. There was another version, but I took that out. Yeah, and this was the final version. And this was this was a friend of mine. Well, he lives in New York now. Michael Monhart, who's a jazz musician, but he and his wife bought it. And my friend Martin Hayes has used it on his album. He's a very well-known Irish fiddle player, and Martin asked to use the image for his album and CD. He brought out an album for his last musical enterprise. So this was second summer, and I finished it in 2021. And I'll keep going here. All right, so that just gives you an idea of maybe the shifts that happen. So then I'm here with, so these are other artists that I'm influenced by. Now it can change. It depends on, it'll change every now and then. But these are ones that are fairly solid I always think of their work and go back to it periodically. So Jack B. Yeats, and he was of the Yeats family in Ireland. The brother was better known probably. And but I don't think Jack B appreciated people saying he was the brother of WB. So, but he was a tremendous painter, and you can maybe see the influences in some of the work. The sometimes kind of garish color, very. To me, growing up and looking at that kind of work, it was really exciting because it was freeing, it was abstract, and it wasn't limited to a very kind of pedantic way of working. And Turner, I have to always include Turner. I love Turner's work. I try not to look at him too much, but I think that he's been somebody that I say stumbled on. You can't stumble on Turner, but I think at the same time, his work it's always there. It's always there. It's important. It's a feast to look at his work. But that's one of the paintings that I love. This is an Irish artist, a contemporary of mine. He's 10 years older. He's very well known. I'm not, but he's. I like his paintings. He grew up in England and then moved back to County Mayo, actually. So he wouldn't know who I am from a hole in the wall, but I know all about him, and I do like the work a lot. He uses a lot of kind of photographic references in the work, so a lot of the images, he'll incorporate a photograph into the paintings. They're big paintings. This is Milton Resnick. Not the best, I wouldn't say it's the best example of the Milton Resnicks that I've looked at, but it gives you an idea. It's the density of his paints that really draws me in. I think he's a very, very spiritual painter. And that's something that in recent years I've really started to maybe it's that kind of density in making paintings, that kind of visceral sensibility is important to me. Maybe as I get older, I don't know why. But Caspar David Friedrich is another painter, and he's been like Turner, not Turner, but Rothko would have looked at him a lot. Wolfgang Leib, he's very influential on loads of painters. But these are just small paintings, so beautiful. And he's somebody I look at every now and then. And I can't get away from Soutine either. I absolutely love Haim Soutine's work. And so I go back to him. And one of my all-time favorites is Rembrandt. And I had to put two images in because I love this painting so much, especially that area of the painting. And just the visceral quality and the way he handles paint and colour and light. It's just fascinating. And then this was a painting I knew at the National Gallery of Ireland when I was an undergrad. And, it stayed with me, comes back to me every now and then. So I that's something that, I'll always visit it if I go to the National Gallery in Dublin. So this was, you can see here, the influence. This is a painting I did in 2012. And I definitely can see, I was looking at Rembrandt, but there was also another painter, I'm just realizing that I didn't include him, Jake Berthoud, an American painter. Berthot, Jake Berthot. And I absolutely love Jake Berthot's work. So he's another painter that I feel was wonderful to look at. And, you know, there's several others, of course. So that's Berthot, and that was kind of rested, was even a kind of nod to that painting at the National Gallery. This is called Crannog. Crannogs were circular house dwellings, again in Ireland, and they were often surrounded by water. I mean, I wasn't literally trying to create a crannog in my painting, but there was that sensibility that comes across. And again, these paintings are layered and layered and layered, the glazes, gumbles and whatnot. So if I'm going too fast, let me know. This is called Ground, and again, another painting from that same period. And at this point in my work, I started to slow down in the process of making, and I really started to kind of build these kind of luminous layers of light and color. And I'd even though I was working abstractly, I'd still take out like sable brushes toward the end and start, almost like I was defining certain areas. And you'll see that in some of maybe the details in the painting. So that, might seem like a bit of a contradiction to somebody who works with loose kind of layers of paint. And these are small studies. Again, I've thrown in a few small studies. These are actually, all the work is pretty much on canvas or linen. This is on what's called Yupo paper. It's a lovely paper to work with. It's kind of very slippery paper, and it's really nice. It's same with this one. Very nice to work with. And that's another one. And this was a show I had at Linda Hodges called Between the Rural and the Void. Very poetic title there. But I was thinking about, I think also at this time as well, I was starting to go, okay, where do I want my work to go and what is it about? And I think that question continues to come up. I'll read something to you guys in a minute now. And this is a painting called Stumble from that particular show. And again, layered upon layered upon layers. This went through several stages, but I took some of the stages out because I thought they were kind of bad and I didn't want you looking at them. So then I was shown this I showed it 2 years ago in Seattle. And before I showed it, I thought, I need to work on it. So if you can see the bottom part there and the little bit up here. So I changed it. And I forgot I did that to it, and I have it somewhere in my studio. But yeah, so that was that one I changed. And this was Stumble, that was also in that same show, Between the Rural and the Void. So I'll stop here and I'll read this here because it gives a sense of more of a kind of where the work was coming from. Over the past 10 years, my paintings have proffered the form and conventions of history painting through colour, space, structure, and the materiality of paint. Migration, you'll see it in a few minutes. 2015 memorialized the suffering of people expelled from their ancestral lands and dwellings and forced to migrate to other parts of Ireland, other places within Ireland as a result of English colonisation. The declaration to Hell or to Connacht is attributed to Oliver Cromwell, who enforced mass migration within the country. Connacht, the west of Ireland, which is where I'm from, was considered inferior and much less desirable than the other 3 provinces of Ireland. So Ireland is 4 provinces, Ulster, Munster, Leinster, all good, fairly good lands, and Connacht, there's 4 provinces. So Connacht, the west of Ireland, was considered inferior, much less desirable than the other 3 provinces. Pirate Queen, it's a pink painting, you'll see it in a minute, commemorates the 16th century Irish woman known colloquially as Gráinne Whale, Grace O'Malley, whose story embodies the historical and rebellious doggedness of formidable independent women. We probably have several of them around here. Trace, 21, and Rumour, 22, deal with persisting stories of hardship that permeate land holdings land holding that I was familiar with, and their ongoing impact over generations. And that's still going on, like the sort of history of a place, even fighting over fields. It's going on in my own family. So I hate to admit it, but it is. If you've ever seen the movie The Field, it's not quite that bad, but it's still going on. I frequently use tropes of romantic landscape painting as a lens to relate to the history of settlement, expansion, and oppression. History painting has often glorified the power of the church, the state, or the painting's process. My paintings instead memorialize the past, paying tribute to my ancestors who worked the land or were displaced. In my paintings, I acknowledge the past and the collective implications of our darker histories, where I lean into potent tropes of historical landscape painting to depict these collective memories. So that's kind of more or less the last 10 years. I'll run through the paintings that I have here. So this is called Up the Road. And it specifically, I don't want to get into the whole story of it, but it relates to, you've heard of the reform schools, the industrial schools in Ireland. It is relating to a true story of one of those. It's not running to move. So this is the same painting, 1, 2. Bad image, but gives you an idea. And that was it, Up the Road. So that's the painting as it exists today. Mind you, it's quite damaged, so it's rolled up. So the Up the Road was kind of a reference. I started to kind of think about, there was a lot in the news about the industrial schools and how really what happened with, once Ireland got its independence from England or from Britain, the church the government and the church really took over, and this, without going into all the whole story, this family were taken away from their mother by the priest and put into Letterfrack, which was one of the worst industrial schools in Ireland. And my father went to school with the boy in the family. He was 5 years old, and Dad said, all I remember is going out to the end of the road, the Boreen, and he didn't turn up. They used to walk to school together, and he never saw him again till 30 years later. They meet in England. But it's terribly sad what happened. That whole history is more and more information is coming out on it. But I started to kind of tap into that kind of, just stories I was reading. And I suppose, you have the same thing that went on in different parts of this country as well. So that's just giving you an idea of how the paintings looked in the space. And this was another painting from that same period. Again, it was 2014. I actually reworked it. So it changed. This is another painting this was the first really big painting I did. And I think I wanted to see if I could make a really large painting. They're all big, but this was exceptionally big. And I was actually going up for tenure as well around this time. I didn't do it for tenure, but I wanted to challenge myself to see, could I stay with an image over a long period of time, and what that would do to painting, do to the way I think about making work. And so that was the first one. And this one, I called it Mary Larkin's Bottom. It refers to a particular field way behind our house. It's not on our land, but about a mile from our house. And again, sort of tying in with sort of what I just read in relation to content. And this is the old Jacob Lawrence Gallery at the University of Washington. And that was where I had my show when I went up for promotion in 2013, long time ago. And that's the two big paintings. They're both about 12, 14, what are they? Yeah, 12, 14 feet in length. I often forget the specific sizes. And this was a painting then I showed. I was fortunate enough to get into an exhibition at the Portland Art Museum as part of the Northwest Art Awards. And so this was one of the paintings I showed in that, put in that exhibition. And again, this was kind of in honor of people who, sort of the past ancestors and people maybe that I maybe allude to in my work, that history, if you like. And this was another painting, and again, that same period of tying in with history painting as well. This was stage 1 of it, and there were several stages. This was stage 2. I'm saving you the bother of having to look at really awful stages of the painting. So that was called Going, and again, that notion of kind of moving from one place to another. This is the migration painting that I talked about in the last piece I read, and I was at it was before 2016 election, but I was really thinking about migration within a particular place, my own, where I grew up, this painting, it's an important painting for me on a number of levels. I don't know, it was something I'm actually really drawn to working with a really dark palette, and I love using red as well, but I think also I use red symbolically in the work. So I seem to always kind of bring it in as just I don't know, just it has a kind of power for me that maybe I think other colours maybe are too nice, for want of a better way of describing it. And these are 2 paintings done around the same time. They were sort of commissions, but I didn't work that. I kind of said, I'll give me a size and I'll work with you on it. So that's kind of how but they tie in with the same thesis, if you like. And so then this was a show I had and I've certain images now will come up. I'm kind of going back, weaving back and forth. This was called What Was, Unmarked, and again tying in with something that happened or didn't happen, and that again the idea of places not being marked, but that you'd maybe walk through a space and you recognize it because you know the place. On a kind of deeper level. And the title of this one is called Gone Annam. And Gone Annam means without a name. And I was thinking of, again, I think when I started the painting, I was reading about the reform schools, the industrial schools, and there was a terrible discovery in Tuam, County Galway, which is about 40 miles from where my family grew up, of these children that were buried sort of without anyone. The family's been contacted. They died in an orphanage in Tuam, and they're being dug up at the minute. Actually, all the bodies. It was really tragic, and it's still tragic, I'm sure, for families that had. I don't know if they would have even known that they had relatives in the orphanage. But anyway, Gone Annam was maybe a nod to that or recognition of that. And Annam and Anam. Annam is name in Irish, and Anam is soul. So I was kind of going to play with Annam, Anam. Even though, for anyone who would be an Irish linguist, I thought, no, I better not do that. Like, I'm not an expert when it comes to the Irish language by any means, so I didn't want to go there. This is I showed this painting at the San Juan Islands Museum, so that's just an installation shot. This is just a small painting. It doesn't exist anymore, but it exists in this side. So it was kind of done as a green painting much earlier, and I showed it, I think, and I had it in an exhibition, and then I worked on these 2 together. And I don't have good images of either of these paintings, I apologize. So then this is the bog land and body, and these are, so I have a few images. This is my father working again. He was mad. When I say mad, he would love to go to the bog and make sure that the turf was you foot the turf, and making sure, praying for dry weather so that you could bring the turf in. And the tradition is carrying on. My sister does it now, and family members. And I've gotten caught many a time I've been in Ireland. Even last fall I was back. My father was sadly about to pass away. We were taking care of him at home, and my brother-in-law said, "Come on, you're coming to the bog with me." So we did. We were bagging the turf. It was like this, and so you'd bag it and bring it home. So that's another image of the bog. Just from, and that was like the bed. That was last year. It was really wet, and so we had to get the turf in and try to dry it inside. But I have somebody who's important to me is as a writer is Seamus Heaney, and of course he's very well known. Sadly passed away, but he's very well known poet. And Heaney, a lot of his poems dealt with the bogland, and he's one of the things he talked about in one of his books called Preoccupation Selected Prose. I think it's might be the 70s, early 80s. He said that when he was reading about the frontier and the West, that the frontier and the West were important, whereas like the important myth in American consciousness, that the bog is it's laid down as answering the Irish myth. And he wrote, one of the poems he wrote was Bogland. And I'll read just a few bits from it because it's a long poem and you don't need to hear me reading for so long. But he says, "We have no prairies to slice a big sun at evening. Everywhere the eye concedes to encroaching horizon." And for me, I love that idea of, for me coming to America and you have the big, like, American landscape, America, the grandeur of America. At least I think for many of us in the past, many immigrants, that's what we saw. You just, you recognized the opportunity in coming here. And whereas in Ireland, it was a very different kind of experience. But he goes, he says, our unfenced country is bog that keeps crusting between the sights of the sun. They've taken the skeleton of the great Irish elk out of the peat, set it up, an astounding crate full of air. Butter sunk under more than 100 years was recovered salty and white. The ground itself is kind black butter, melting and opening underfoot, missing its last definition by millions of years. They'll never dig coal here. Only the waterlogged trunks of great firs, soft as pulp. Our pioneers keep striking inwards and downwards. Every layer they strip seems camped on before. The bog holes might be Atlantic seepage. The wet centre is bottomless. And so that idea of, when I'm painting, I think as well, that idea of a kind of, not a pit, but a bottomless kind of space. And maybe being in tune with that kind of, being connected with land in that regard. So this was, you can see here, like, it gets very wet and seepy in the winter. This was one of the bodies taken out of, I haven't done enough research because I was actually looking to see if there was a title for this body or where they got it from, but there were several recovered in the bogs, and they were they were preserved because they're quite acidic, I think. Is it acidic? Yeah. And so this was I took this picture when I was at the National Museum of Ireland a number of years ago. But it's, you think, you nearly can see why it would be preserved. Because it's kind of untouched. They're digging out of, turf out at the bog or cutting it out. But if the bodies are down further, they're going to be preserved. And they've found a lot of artifacts and as well in the soil, in the bog peat soil, I suppose. Some other artists that are important is Anselm Kiefer, and actually he spent time in Ireland. There was one particular painting of his where he kind of had been looking at bogland. I mean, that's not what his work is about, but like you can see the sensibility, and you can maybe see why I would be interested in the work. Again, the scale of the work is important. This was I mentioned that to Gary, and I was talking just at the beginning before this thing got started, that I had taught in Rome, and one of the perks of being at the University of Washington, and one thing I'm really appreciative of, is just the support over the years, but the opportunity to teach abroad. And so I've taught in Rome on 3 occasions. And this was, we took a trip last year to Florence, and this show was going on in Florence. This was actually outside in the courtyard. And so me and my colleague Kurt, we decided we'd check it out before the students, and had to get some pictures of it. This was we didn't go into the exhibition, but this was the painting. And that's a close-up. I don't like pictures of myself, but that's just you can see that's Kurt there. There. Sorry, apologies. So that's Kurt, and then that's the detail of the painting, right? But you can see the physicality of the material. Now, how could one do that with paint without collage? I don't know, but that's what I think about sometimes. Can I get that same feeling across? And this is the back of the painting. Sometimes it's fascinating to look at backs of paintings to see how they're constructed. But I was really wanting to know, and I love the little drawings on it there. They're really kind of fascinating. And then you can see some of the paintings I looked at. Trace, one of the paintings that I showed and that I talked about in relation to the trace of land and space. This is by El Greco, and I was kind of thinking of him a lot when I was making those vertical paintings, and just the sensibility, not trying to copy his kind of figurative process. Mark Bradford is an artist from LA that I think is fascinating. Cecily Brown is an English artist, lives in New York, wonderful artist. Howard Hodgkin, abstract painter from England, no longer with us, but amazing, lovely physicality of paint. And I kind of started to look at him more in recent years when I started doing the other works. Joan Schneider is another painter. I couldn't get the year she did this, but it's part of her field series. And then these are some small paintings of mine that I took photographs of for something. And the small ones change and change and change again. And this is a Battleground from 2021, a small painting. It's oil and linen. And that's me in the studio with Trace up. So I hadn't shown you Trace. I talked about it. And so this was like stage 1, we'll say, and maybe stage 10. But you can see, and I was trying to give a sense of maybe walking through the land and having, encountering the history of the land, be it lazy beds or be it famine cottages or something that might have occurred, maybe bad stuff that occurred in the landscape. And this was kind of where I thought it was going to end, and this was the end of it. So I showed that at the San Juan Island Museum. It's a very tall painting. I think the dimensions are based on a Kiefer painting. So then this is Pirate Queen, and that was the reference to Granuaile, I always say the first Irish feminist. She was a pirate actually, but she was one of the O'Malley clan, and she was quite the character, and she's really wonderful. But that was the start. I'll go quickly because I noticed the time. And that's another one, and you can see what I did in the end. So it changed, and for me an important painting. I think just the whole shift to a kind of different palette. I was trying to see, could I make it work? I had seen I don't know if any of you saw the exhibition called Figuring History at the Seattle Art Museum, but there's the Curry James Marshall paintings, and I I thought, well, could I use pink the way Kerry James Marshall uses pink and black in his paintings, and could I give it the same kind of clout, if you like, that kind of, as Seamus Heaney might say, the lump in the throat effect, where you stop, it kind of grabs you. And I wanted that to come across in the painting. This is called Cray, which is clay. Kind of ties in with the book I was reading called Crane the Killer, which is set in a graveyard in Ireland, and it's it was a book that has only just been translated into English, so it's kind of fascinating book. Runes and More Journeys. So this is, I'll go through them fairly quickly. Moore Hall House is literally 2 miles from our house. It was burnt in the 1920s during the Civil War in Ireland. They're an interesting family. We're Catholic for the most part. George Moore, the writer, lived here, and painter. But the family, the lineage is kind of Catholic. They refused to become Protestant. This is Clogher House, and these were the landlords in our area. And my grandfather worked for this family, and actually my uncle also worked for the my granduncle worked for the family and was murdered as a result of him ploughing land that some of the tenants wanted for themselves. So it was later that my grandfather worked for this house, for the family. They were actually very well liked in the area, but the house fell into ruin. It burnt down, and that's it today. So that's some of the family. We went to see it in 2019, and you can see there a picture of it in the distance. It was quite a beautiful, it said this was the back entrance. So you had a gatehouse, you'd go in the back way, and I remember it really well. And then there was the front entrance on the other side, but hundreds of acres of land. But I never, the stories about the family were very favourable. They were very supportive of the people. But, people also get greedy, and they want land for themselves, or they want more and more. So that's what happened. I'm showing a few images of, this is an image of Sheila Nagig. Not that I paint Sheila Nagigs, but Sheila Nagigs are these fertility, well, we saw them as fertility goddesses. But you'll often find them on Irish castles and churches. So this is one of the really interesting ones that I discovered recently. So these are the kinds of things where I'm going now is that this is kind of towards the end of the talk, and these are some of the things that are kind of keeping me what's the word I'm looking for? I'm kind of exciting me as I move forward, like where do I want to take the work? This was a 13th century church on Clare Island. I was very surprised to visit it a few years ago and see this painting. And it's very damp area, surrounded, a small island, surrounded by the waters, Atlantic waters. And, you just walk into this church and you see these beautiful paintings on the ceiling. They're quite damaged, as you can tell. But why, who painted them? Where did they come from? And also they're not religious paintings. So they reminded me a bit of sort of what you'd see in Italy in some of the churches, except that you had these, they were much better taken care of. I'm not sure if I can have time to get into this, but this is, you can see here, it's so there was this study done in Ireland in the 1930s by the Peabody Museum, and it was really, this is something I'm thinking about at the minute, and it's maybe a direction I want to go. I want to sort of dig in a bit deeper so that that'll feed my work. Don't know how it'll feed my work. But then again, artists often take these paths and we don't know where they're leading us. But it's was an archaeological and anthropological study that was done in Ireland, and there was a kind of almost eugenic slant to see if we were true Celts. And at the time in Ireland, the director of the National Museum was a guy called Adolf Mayer. And he was very eager to have these Harvard people come over and do this study. But they sort of analysed, had people come in to guard the stations, local police stations, and they measured their brains and different parts of the body and tried to figure out like where people came from and if indeed we were true Celts. And there was a particular study done on West of Ireland women. I know of one man locally who knows something about the study. I haven't met him yet, so I'm going to try to meet him one of the days. Because if you see down here, this is very close, only about 2 miles from where I live. I don't know the exact place. I know Carnacon really well. I know the area, but I don't know where the actual dig was, the burial was. And so this neighbour friend, he knows it well. And so he's going to maybe show me around and give me more information before I maybe try. I tried to go to the Peabody to see if I could access the archives and see what artefacts they took out of Ireland at that time, but I wasn't able to. Unfortunately, the Peabody, they weren't allowing people into the archives. And I was also considering applying for a Radcliffe, but there's no funding left this year for a Radcliffe fellowship. So I'm going to sit on it for a while longer, maybe do some more research and maybe write a better proposal and maybe apply sometime down the line so that I could get into the archives at the Peabody. And then this is something as well that I've been reading. It's called The Lost Gaeltacht. The Gaeltacht, there are these Irish-speaking areas that are in Ireland, still in Ireland. And my great-grandparents were native speakers. And I found this book when I was home last year, which was around the time my father passed, and I walked into a bookstore needing to use the bathroom, and I saw this book, and I was like, "Oh my God, what's this book?" And I opened it to this page, but that's Tom Mannion, Tomás O'Mannion, and then Marie Walsh, Maura Nivranach. And they were moved from. So what the Lost Gaeltacht is, that in the 1930s up to the 1940s, the Irish government, under Eamon de Valera, were moving people from rural areas they were moving them up to richer land, we'll say up near Dublin. So my great-grandparents were moved from an Irish-speaking area to County Meath, to a big estate where an English landlord had owned it, and there was lots of land. And so the area they moved from was really congested and extremely poor. But my great-grandparents decided to go because their only daughter was moving. Most of their family had already immigrated to America, or one daughter was living in Ballintubber. That was my grandmother. So a very sad story of how they moved. My grandfather was anointed. That's where you're dying and you're anointed, given blessings on the bus twice on the way up to Meath. But they lived another 2 or 3 years after they moved. And, there are some good things about the move. Like, the families did quite well and they were educated. I think that was the agreement they made with the government, that the kids would get an education, because up to that time, there was no people didn't go to secondary school. In fact, education didn't become free till 1970, about 1969, 1970. Secondary school education became free. And yeah, so it's a fascinating book, fascinating read. Where does it lead me? I don't know. But that's one thing. So I could talk more about that, because it's really, very kind of, it's just, for me, very exciting. This was a picture I found of my grandmother on the O'Toole side, not on my mother's side. This was on Dad's side, and they used to make these pictures and send them to America. So it was a postcard. So this, I don't think I have the back of it, but that was my grandmother. And this obviously was my dad with the rosary beads around his neck, because I figured out, based on the, just the characters and the year, that was we're into where I am today, really. That's a stage 1 of a painting, stage 2 of a painting. That's at J. Rinehart Gallery. I'll go quickly now. This is Caught. It's a painting I don't particularly like, but this was stage 1. I was going to take it out. I should have. Stage 2, and that was stage 3. It's a tough painting. It's a bear of a painting, really, but I couldn't give up on it. And I I'm not. I forgot about the time. Sorry, my apologies. Rumor is I'll finish up with these. Rumor was in my last show, and it's a hard painting to for me. When I made it, I thought it was tough painting because I was painting very differently. The paint is much thicker, denser, raw. And at the time I was going through a kind of, there was something going on in the family. We had found out some stuff about family members and distant family members. There was pretty troublesome. So, the rumours were flying, if you like. Behind the Wire is a reference to what was going on in during the political troubles in Northern Ireland, when you had political prisoners held by the British Army in Mountjoy jail. Parting Glass. This is in honour of a lovely colleague of mine, Denzel Hurley. Denzel sadly passed away a number of years ago, but when I made the painting, I thought I'll give it, called Parting Glass. Parting Glass is often it's an air, but you play it at, just a different, it can be played any time, but it'll often be played when people pass. But I thought Parting Glass for Denzel. And this was a study for lie of the land. Small study that obviously, if I'm doing a study, I don't necessarily stick to the study. It's not like a tight study for the painting, and that's the painting, Lay of the Land. It's a huge painting, but it was tying in with, again, that notion of what the land holds, the memory of the how land itself will hold on to memory. And we hold on to memories, and maybe we misremember things, but I think the land itself has that power. And that's me and my daughter at my last opening. I told her today, she's just moved to Pittsburgh, and I said, I have one picture of you. And then this was Stray Sod. I think this is the last, Stray Sod. Stray Sod actually means, so it could be Fógin Mara, but Fógin Mara was often where people would say, you've got the Fógin Mara, or you got the Fógin Mara. It means if you go out at night and you get lost in a field, you step on a stray sod. A sod is a sod of turf, but it could be a piece of earth, and you can't get out of it. And people really believe this happened. Actually, I believe it happened because I've had it happen to me, but not in a field. I don't want to say where it happened, but it did happen. And I hadn't too many drinks. But people would go out and they couldn't, they'd enter a field. And there's a great story in relation to Clogher House, one of the big houses, where somebody, it happens to two sets of people who are leaving the house and they get lost. But so Stray Sod is kind of smart alecky in some ways, maybe title, but it's also like that idea of getting lost and not knowing where you are in the land. So that was another stage. And you can see some of the paintings here on some of the ones that you saw, not all of them. And then that was me, that's the painting. And then I have here, that's me and my student Miriam. I mentioned the Rome program, and Miriam is I love my students, and she's at the Rome Centre now doing an internship for a year at the UW Rome Centre, and she was nearly like my daughter. She also became friends with my daughter, so it was just she was just a wonderful person. But I'm showing the picture for the scale, really, and it's nothing more than that, except that she's awesome. And then this is the, so no, I won't do that because there's a song I was going to play. I could play a tiny bit of it, but I don't know if we have time. But I wanted to say, and I can play a tiny bit, it's a sad one, but I listen to a lot of music and it really does help me in my work. And the song I was going to play is, it's a Song of the Books, our own Nilower, and it's terribly sad song about somebody losing his books, but I'll leave it. I won't go there. But I wanted to say Gurmila Mahagiv, and my Irish isn't great, but that means 100,000 thanks to you. and it's just thank you in Irish, and especially thanks to Gary for inviting me to the talk and to do the talk, and thanks to all of you for coming and for listening to me, and thanks also. You've actually given me space here and time to share my work. And of course, I didn't go through hardly any of the notes, but that's all right. And thanks also. The UW, I always like to say thanks to, because I feel like, I've been given this great opportunity, and it's just great to have that support. I think we all need each other. We all need support. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Yeah, thank you.
I was just wondering if anyone has any questions that they would have. So that's Helen.
Oh, I'd be happy to play a bit. It's a bit sad. I don't know. I thought I'd have.
Okay, so I have a question, and that is, your paintings change a lot. How do you know when you're, well, not when you're done, but when you have to change it?
It's a great question. Oh, sorry. That's a great question. I think it's a feeling probably too more than anything. But they have changed more in recent years. So I think because the way I'm handling paint at the moment, it's a much more kind of ragged, there's much more ragged approach to painting ragged kind of brush marks. It's taken me longer to get to that, the finish line, if you like. But I think, it might be it could be the light is not right, or the color is too harsh, or the marks are maybe, I'll use the word ragged again, there's something in the way I've handled the marks that's not working for me. I mean, I think sometimes I really overwork paintings, and I've ruined paintings by going back into the painting. So, but I think it's, yeah, for sure. There's, I'm never 100% sure. But I think in the end, I have to be maybe a bit cocky and say to myself, well, that's actually done. So, and there are times too when I will look at a painting and think, I look at the painting and kind of go, I should change it, but I have to stop myself, because I'll always find something, and that's where I get a bit obsessive about the marks, or the light or color or something like that. So does that answer? It's a hard one. I wish I was a faster painter, but I also think I like living with the painting for a long period of time, and I think the working large has allowed me to do that. So, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Your paintings are so beautiful and they're so large, and you're not a big person. How do you manage to work in such a big fashion?
Well, I'm smallish. I'm small. I think that I like the challenge. I really do. And I think it would be easy for me to kind of make smaller paintings and not push myself. But in a way, I can give you the one flip answer would be, I need to do it for myself. And I have the opportunity and I have the space to do it. But I definitely am. I'm more at home when I'm working on a big painting than I am on a small painting. At the same time, I don't want to dismiss the small paintings because they're important for me to have that time to go back and forth. So I'll have small paintings that I do, or sometimes just, give them to people, but I think I need those small paintings as well. There are also maybe like in music, you have your sort of big performance, and then you have your practice. I don't know if there's an analogy there between the two.
What I find so What I find so exciting is in my 90th year, I'm more aware of how I'm changing, and I'm not the same person I was in various points. But I wonder, people would love the stages, and I was attracted to some of the stages that came to what is the last stage. But they have such great reproductions now that you could actually have those available. Like before you start on the next one, get a good picture of that one, and I bet people will buy them.
Yeah, I've been told that. And fortunately, I can't get them back from people when they buy them. But except there is somebody. There was 2 paintings there where a friend of mine bought a number of paintings, and he has one, and I said, "Can I get it back?" And he told me I could, because I don't like the stage. But thank you. Yeah. I was going to say one thing about the big painting when I first started working, just in answer to this size. So when I started working on the first really big painting called Everywhere, I remember it took up one wall in my studio, and I remember physically trying to get from one side of the painting to the other, and I was tired. I was like, this is hard, and I think the biggest thing for me working big is that if I have to climb up a ladder, that's not so great. And I also think that I used to be much fitter. So it's, my body is changing too. And I don't think that, I think the horizontal makes it a bit easier, but still it depends on how tall they are. But as I kind of, get older as well, I think I have to think, well, if I'm going to work large, I do need better system in the studio, safer system, rather than climbing up a ladder and holding with one hand. I don't want to do that anymore.
Would you share with us your where your studio is and the history of where your studios have been?
Well, yeah, sure. So when I came to Seattle first, I'll say here first. So I had a studio. I remember actually Denzel Hurley, the former colleague of mine that I kind of named a painting after. Denzel said, whatever you do, he had been teaching here for a few years before me. And Denzel said, whatever you do, make sure you get your studio close to where you live. That should be the most important move. And it was good advice that he gave me as a young faculty member. So I had a studio down in Pioneer Square in Noodleworks, just past Pioneer Square. And then I got a studio over in Madrona, a live workspace. Norman Lundin owned an extra building. So I rented from Norman, and I had a studio next door. That was fantastic. And then the university, I have to say, it's the best gift I've gotten from got different gifts, but it's a really great honor, I suppose, that we all have the faculty of studios. We have studios over in Sandpoint. And actually, if any of you ever wanted to do a studio visit, I'd be more than happy. So maybe I shouldn't be there, but I really would. I'd be delighted to show you, kind of do it in small groups, and we can, Maybe that's putting more work on you, Gary. I don't know, but I'd be happy to show you because it's a great space. It's the old naval base in Sandpoint, and yeah, so we've got really nice studios, and the good thing is the ventilation is great. So the air is, I was told, the air is filtered every 20 minutes or something like that. I don't know anything about technology and air and whatnot, but I know it's good. That you know, even if you're using oil paint, you don't get the smells are not kind of lingering in the air. Yeah, so we moved then. I used to be in Fremont, and then I moved over near the university about 6 years ago. So that's really fantastic, actually. And that's a worry if I retire, when I retire, that I won't have that studio. So it's just the best studio. Before I came here, I lived in New York for a year, and I had a studio, live workspace in Brooklyn. I got a space. It was rough, from somebody who had gotten a Guggenheim and a Prix de Rome in 1 year. So she was going off to Rome for a year, and she'd already gotten a Guggenheim fellowship. So she subletted her studio to me and so I had it for a year, and then I got the job out in Seattle. And so yeah, I've had when I lived in Chicago. I was in Nebraska, Provincetown, Singapore, lots of places. So I've had different kinds of studios. The longest studio is the one I'm in, and it's great. It's mighty. Yeah.
I would like to thank Helen for sharing her history, her inspiration, seeing the trajectory of her work, and sharing it with us at Horizon House. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thanks.